Hello, everybody. Are we ready? Good morning. Nice to see everyone here. Hello, my name is Brynjar Andersen Saus, and I will be moderating the panels in this event. I'm a project manager for Tromsø as the European Youth Capital in 2026, and the goal of our project is to make Tromsø, Northern Norway, and the Arctic a better place to live, work, and create for young people. And with that goal in mind, we're very interested in the findings from the OECD report we are here to discuss today. The northern sparsely populated areas of Finland, Norway, and Sweden, as we can see here on the map, the highlighted areas are the areas we'll be discussing today. And they're becoming increasingly important for Europe's geopolitical and economic interests. With their unique geography, characterized by low population density and challenging climate conditions, these regions face complex challenges, including an aging population, long distances from major markets, limited connectivity, and high transport costs. The OECD report, Building Resilience to Global Transitions in the EU, Northern Sparsely Populated Areas, presents some major findings about the current situation for the Northern Sparsely Populated Areas and outlines some recommendations to guide us towards a stronger, more sustainable region. Today, we'll bring together regional politicians and stakeholders to explore the OECD's findings, address knowledge gaps, and discuss mechanisms needed to leverage opportunities in the NSPAs. But before we get going with the panel discussions and starting to ask some questions of the stakeholders, we'll hear a keynote by Jose Enrique Garcilaso, Deputy Head of Division for Regional Development and Multi-Level Governance at the OECD's Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. Mr. Garcilaso will present some findings from the report and summarize the recommendations presented. So, without further ado, I give the word over to Jose Enrique.
Testing. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much for the introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. It's actually the first time I've seen sun in this part of the world. And I do remember we started working with the NSPA about 10 years ago. The report was done in 2017, and we did the missions in 2015. And the best trip at the OECD I've ever had was actually coming to Norway on the Hurtigruten that we traveled from Bergen all the way to Kirkenes. So that was very, very interesting to get some insights. But today, I'm going to focus my discussion on what's happening with the current reports that we're doing. It's a report that builds upon the last one that we did in 2017, and it has been financed by the European Commission with the TSI, the Technical Support Instrument. There will be a formal launch. We're discussing the specifics, so I'm not going to go into all of the findings of the report, but I do want to give you sort of some flavors to see what's coming out. It's a result, I would say, of many teams working together. Of course, the NSPA teams from the 14 or 13, I never know if one of the Norway is considered as one or two regions, have been working on. And an OECD team and the Commission has also been involved with some peer reviewers. So I would say that the focus on this new report is looking at new challenges and opportunities connected to some of the mega trends that we have been working on within the OECD, trying to understand what are the opportunities and challenges, for example, on the green transition, demographic change, innovation, but also thinking about competitiveness. And that topic is very, very important nowadays, as a lot of discussions within the EU are on the Draghi report. There's the discussion about reindustrialization now with the US administration. So I think that topic is extremely important to think about how to build the competitiveness of this area. And then, of course, multi-level governance and policy foresight. And the way we did this report within the OECD, we focus a lot on evidence based on data. So we look first at the data to try to identify how are the 14 regions performing vis-a-vis other comparable regions. And in order to identify what are the areas of strengths, the areas of weakness, how can we improve, where's the potential, And how does the performance within these 14 regions compare to comparable types of regions? And for that, we have a typology within the OECD. We have two types of regions, large regions, small regions. The small regions are subclassified into 5 types using a functional criteria, a functional sort of like an urban area and the distance to that. And within that, we find that there's 3 regions within the NSPA. They're classified as non-metropolitan small, and the rest are non-metropolitan remote. So what we do is we try to compare the performance of these 14 vis-a-vis the other NSPA regions, and then vis-a-vis the comparable group of OECD regions. So that's what we do a little bit on the analysis. And then, of course, what we also try to do with this report is to try to see how the NSPA has advanced in the recommendations from the year 2017 into the new areas that we look at. Within the OECD, we have, I would say, moved a little bit from trying to understand how disparities are being driven by the so-called mega trends. The big trend that we see within the OECD is that there's a trend of convergence between countries, but inside countries there's a lot of divergence, and in particular, the divergence occur between large cities and rural places. The further away you are, the bigger the gap it appears. Specifically, since 2008, since the global financial crisis, and of course the pandemic, and also the recent energy crisis and the Russia's war against Ukraine. So, in other words, we're trying to really understand how these megatrends are shaping not just the economic opportunities, but really societies as a whole, and what regions can do to take advantages of opportunities, how to move from a state of reaction towards one that is more like forward-looking, and how to prepare yourself to benefit from some of these opportunities. So that's within the OECD. We've been also trying to work within this framework, so it came quite well, the work that we try to do within the NSPA. The first thing that we all know that NSPA regions are remote, they're far away from markets, they face harsh conditions, but when we really look at comparing the NSPA to other types of comparable regions, we do find that the population is small, but so is the population, the average population within remote regions in the OECD. But what is striking is that the population density is particularly low in compared to other types of regions. It's about 2.5 times smaller than the population density in other remote regions. And this is a very important point, because we've been doing a lot of analysis trying to link density with performance. We study the agglomeration benefits, and of course these big cities, the bigger they are, the more agglomeration benefits they produce. But it's also, if you are close to a big city, you can also benefit from what we call borrowed agglomeration benefits. And then density for smaller places also matters. So this is a very important element to try to understand how this low density, what the NSPA can do to improve their performance and their well-being standards. What we find is that, of course, population growth has been stagnating. It has been actually 0.02, I think. It hasn't been growing. In about 6 of the 14 regions, it has positive population growth, but that's something quite common across the OECD. About 9 countries are already losing population, and about 40% of remote regions are already losing population. So, this trend about population decline is I would say, it's something that is occurring everywhere. And in fact, many cities are also losing population. So, how to think about population decline is also something that's quite important to really move from a policy about mitigation towards more adaptation, shrinking smartly, I would say. There's a higher elderly dependency ratio, about 42% against 32%. So NSPA is losing population, has more elderly, but not all is bad news. When we looked a little bit at the composition of the workforce, we find that sort of like the middle range between the ages of 35 and 49, it has been declining. The elderly population has also increased. But what's interesting is that the youth population from the ages of 16 to about 39, the post-secondary has increased in the NSPA. So not all is bad news. And this is something very important, how to take advantage of this increase in the working age population from the post-secondary. In terms of the economic performance, I would say that the NSPA shows higher levels of GDP per capita in relation to other countries in other regions from within the OECD. Lower levels of GDP per capita with respect to the other regions from the NSPA. But in terms of the growth, it's been growing faster than even the national standards. So it's been doing quite good in terms of GDP per capita. And we examined a little bit what were the main drivers of this good performance. And it's a very interesting combination that I think puts the NSPA in a very interesting place moving forward. The primary activities appear to be driving a lot of productivity growth. Fisheries, forestry, mining, agriculture, combined with ICT. So you have on the one hand the sort of primary activities that are combined with ICT and telecommunications. Those are a little bit some of the drivers. The region has lost on manufacturing, but so does many regions have done so. And in terms of labor productivity, it has been growing, although at a slower rate than within the non-SPA. Something that is very, very important is the ability to innovate. And we've done a lot of work on trying to understand innovation outside of the big cities. We know that patents and patent intensity has a lot of headquarter bias. But even though with those limitations, the NSPA appears to be doing quite well in terms of patent intensity, even better when compared to other types of OECD regions that are similar. And when you look at the gap between the patent intensity vis-a-vis the other regions within the NSPA that are not within the non-NSPA, the gap has been closing over time. So it's quite good that even a place that is far away from markets, that doesn't have agglomerations, it's able to innovate around these primary activities. So this is a huge area of strength that I think the policy should leverage and try to improve its attractiveness and its way moving forward. In terms of the climate change, it's also doing quite well in terms of production and use of renewable energy. Within the NSPA, it outperforms the non-NSPA regions within the three countries, but also with similar types of OECD regions. And in terms of the CO2 emissions, it's also trying to, you see this downward path as moving forward. Still, the other regions within the three countries are emitting less than the NSPA, but you know, it's a region that also is specialized on very polluting activities like mining and forestry. So in comparison to other OECD regions, it's also doing relatively better. So these are all good news. Now, the recommendations that I'm going to show you have to do with of course, the analysis that I showed you, but we also traveled to the 14 regions. We had questionnaires to the 14 regions, and we've done case studies of each of the 14 regions. So when we came to a little bit the action plan and the recommendations, we have about 115 recommendations. You would say, oh, these are a lot of them. But what we tried to do is we tried to identify some recommendations for the NSP as a whole. You know, how can the 14 regions do as a whole? Some recommendations at the country level for the three countries. Some recommendations for the EU are emerging from the report. And then we focus on the three countries. And within the three countries, we focus on a set of recommendations that apply to the national level, and then, of course, across each of the regions. So we have a very good, I would say, set of recommendations moving forward. And what we also try to do is to try to embed them, to make sure that they work for each other. They don't contradict each other. So this is a little bit the work that we will be presenting. And for today, I just want to focus on a number of them. Of course, I don't have the time in my 10 minutes to go over all of them. But for example, what are we recommending for the NSP as a whole? How to deal with demographic decline is very important. So I think we suggest to support core services in smaller local labor markets. So this is trying to really address the places that are really losing population, that are facing higher cost of education and health, how to support them, and how to support it by multi-level governance. You know, the country can build on what the region is doing and try to find alignment. So we saw times where there was activities that were not the same. Second is how to encourage smart shrinking. We see that across the OECD, try to repopulate is not a very smart strategy. So we're applying more towards adaptability. So how to ensure you have smart shrinking for the municipalities that are viable. And of course, some municipalities are losing a lot of population, and for those, I think it's important to focus on logistic and financial assets, at least to ensure that there's some density that can be sustainable to the provision of services. We also try to stress on intermunicipal collaboration and shared services, pool labor resources. So whenever it's possible, to try to build scale, economies of scale, economies of scope. But of course, when it's not possible in very remote places, there we recommend to use technology and sort of like trying to focus more on e-services. Flexible workforce. This is a very important area to try to remain flexible in terms of the skill sets that you acquire, how to re-educate the elderly workforce within some of these sectors that are changing very, very fast, the skill sets that are demanding. Some recommendations on the labor markets to attract and retain workers in terms of migration policy. We think that targeted migration could be very good in terms of attracting the youth. There's some recommendations on housing and amenities. Unless you don't have those in place, you're not going to attract the youth. You have jobs, you have good offer, but the other elements are quite important. And then how to retain the youth. So better collaborations between what has been given on vocational trainings and universities with the labor market opportunities. Focus more on specific tailored supports rather than broad supports on SMEs and entrepreneurship. And then in terms of cooperation, we think that the current cooperation in place has been very, very positive, but we do recommend to go a bit deeper, to try to make it a bit more with strings attached, maybe creating even an NSPA committee for regional cooperation that has a secretariat. So it has produced many good things, but we think that it can go even deeper. And we discuss a lot how to strengthen these east to west collaborations and break through the north and south. So there's many areas that we think, and that comes with a stronger cooperation. And then, of course, we found that there's still a lack of data to better understand the monitoring and evaluation that is needed to some of these places in place. Then we think there's new strategic areas in specific defense and cooperation that call for stronger cross-border collaboration. There's also some recommendations for the EU on this front. And then foresight. Foresight is a very important exercise to try to build together around common opportunities and address common challenges. That goes a bit more further than just collaboration. Doing foresight exercises in combination. There's some recommendations on that front. And then perhaps a couple here. I already mentioned about this integration of local labor markets. This is an area that we think could be strengthening, how to do better matching between local labor markets. And of course, Nordregio has been doing a lot of work, so it will be also trying to do this in cooperation with Nordregio. Thinking about decentralizing some of the ways to deliver services, going from less prescription into more outcomes from the national governments to allow the regions to maybe innovate and try new elements, what works for them, trying to go less from a rigid system to more flexible approaches. And of course, that also means giving more financing to the regional level, avoiding unfunded mandates is very, very important. Then focus on very isolated municipalities, thinking about also on the transport. There were some recommendations in the past, but now in this report we focus also on the renewable energy infrastructures, and the digital infrastructures are as important as the sort of like the transportation ones. And then I already mentioned the needs to get better data. For example, we couldn't find disaggregated data for farming, fisheries, and forestry. All three of them are very different, but there's no good information they can give us an idea of how these are performing and looking at the strengths and the weaknesses. And just to finalize for the EU, we think that the EU could also help to promote Arctic innovation hubs and platforms. That can be also done through developing some sort of guidelines for climate resilience infrastructure. Thinking about encouraging Arctic-specific technologies such as the digital twins and so forth, creating platforms for exchange. So there's also some elements that the EU can do to further strengthen this part. Also thinking about the just transition, and we've been working with many regions and countries within the OECD that are facing this discontent, and it has to do a lot with this green transition in terms of who is benefiting from the green transition. What we're seeing is that a lot of the big firms and the big players are the ones that are looking at the opportunities, but how can you really make the transition that is a bit fair? How can you get the local communities, how can you bring benefits to the local communities and to the small SMEs in place? So it's a lot about partnerships. There's some recommendations there that we think should go forward. And then on the energy security, and I understand this is a sensitive topic today in Norway. So I'll stop it with that, and I just wanted to give you some sort of an idea of some of the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Enrique. You can stay with us up here. Now, in the first panel of this session, we'll talk to some major stakeholders and actors in this area. So we'd like to welcome to the stage Claude Verandreville, Head of Division for Western Europe and Special Envoy for Arctic Matters at the European External Action Service. I would also like to welcome Mats Kvitt Fredriksen, Executive Director for the Arctic Economic Council, and Dag Avango, Director of the Arctic 6 and Director of the Center for the Arctic and Antarctic at Luleå University of Technology. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me up here. We'll try to talk through this. I want to start off with you, Enrique, since you're warmed up and ready to go and already running. Thank you so much for your keynote and your presentation. It's very interesting to see the summary of some of the content of the report. And I just want to start off with, there was a report in 2017. There was the published territorial review of the northern sparsely populated areas. Now it's been 8 years. And this new report is coming out. So I wanted to ask you, what has changed with the NSPAs in that time? Has the recommendations from the earlier report been implemented? And do you see any change in this area that report from 2017 has affected this area?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That was also part of the exercise that we did to try to see how much the region has advanced with the previous recommendations. And what we see is that there's, for the OECD, it's very important to have this continuity of policy. It's a little bit with the work that we do to make sure when there's changes in the government, both at national and regional, at least the good policies are sort of like, the pendulum doesn't switch from one place to the other. So what we've seen with the previous recommendations is that this cooperation has produced already a lot of good results. I mean, having a unified voice within the EU is very, very important in terms of trying to get recognition, assets, and resources dedicated to the NSPA. But of course, the world has changed, as I mentioned before. Whereas before, I would say the focus was more around how to improve within hard infrastructure, local labor markets. Now we try to see of how to take a bit more of a forward-looking approach, how this collaboration could be not just in terms of the day-to-day, but really coming up with a common strategy moving forward. And not just vis-a-vis the EU, but really how does the region see itself in 20 or 30 or 40 years of time, and how is it going to work and achieve that together? So I would say a lot of the new recommendations are around the tools that allows the region to really walk into that direction. I mentioned before the need to have better data to monitor, to evaluate, to develop these foresight exercises, to understand what's it going to do in terms of its demographic challenges, how is it going to address very low densely populated areas. The good thing about population trends is that we can predict how they're going to be in 5 and 10 and 15 years, and we can also estimate the cost. So we already know how the picture is going to be looking for some of these communities. So trying to come up with these forward-looking plans to anticipate rather than moving from a reactive measure. And of course, the new areas that are very relevant are around the security. I think the border issues with Russia calls for even stronger cooperations. This cross-border before was sort of something that was in the place, but now it's really a necessity. And how can you really come up with around security issues that are in the interest of all the NSPA? So I think I would say there's a lot of continuity that needs to be even deepen a little bit better and refocus on some of the areas. That's a little bit the spirit of some of the recommendations.
Awesome, thank you for that. And then we'll move on to our panelists, the rest of our panelists. Just want to say, if you have any comments on what anyone else says, just give me a little nod and I'll give you the word afterwards. But try to keep those comments brief. So we're a bit short on time today, and I don't trust our politicians in the next panel to keep it brief. So that's going to be your responsibility. Claude Verandreville, I want to ask you, to lift this up on kind of a European level and seen from above in a way. In what way does the EU Arctic policy relate to the issues we heard outlined today by Mr. Garcilaso?
It works. Thank you very much. It does relate a lot. I take you back a little bit, but very shortly. Our Arctic strategy was issued. Last iteration was November 2021. And the key words are prosperity, stability, sustainability. This is still valid. It's very important to stick to our principles. And it bodes very well with what you say, because yourself, you just said, tell me if I misinterpreted in your comment, but you just said, continuity, yes, but more strategic. That's what you call forward-looking. And for us, presence is about security in the broad sense. You're absolutely right. There is the hard security, but there are many aspects of security in which the EU is better placed to intervene. And continuity, because the EU is a major promoter of this support. NSPA, this is a European acronym again. And I'm very proud that among your slides, I could see the European Commission flag. NSPA, we are here to support regional development. We have programs. You call it Interreg, you call it Aurora, you call it cross-border with Norway. Norway is not a member of the EU, but Norway is a very closely associated partner. It's a like-minded partner, and we already finance cross-border cooperation. So when you mention unity, it's about making use in a more strategic way of what we already have. We have the money that we have, making use of what we have in a more cohesive and coherent way, and the EU needs to do its part. Fully agree. Maybe have a fresh look, because the talk these days is, it's aging, it's depopulating. You've just said, not so simple. And it's good news that it's not so simple, because we have the young adult population that is on the rise, I noted. A cliché is a cliché. The cliché is now, it's only how can I put it, not digitally skilled people to cut it short. You said IT. IT is innovation. IT is potential for innovation, and innovation is very, very important to us. I'm looking at my notes of what I noted. You said security is a necessity. I would say presence is a necessity for security reasons, security at large, and continuity with more strategic thinking is essential. I want to highlight two things that I've discussed since Sunday when I arrived everywhere. Youth and cooperation with the actors that are on the ground. This is the Mayor Association, or we have a support there. Arctic, I never know my own acronym, AURC. AURC, I've heard a lot about the benefit of those small-scale but very, very telling example. So it's important. It's grassroots. The EU stands for the development of the local region for the locals at large, including indigenous. And yes, innovation must come there to attract and retain talent. So I'm really very happy to hear the outcome of your result, and I look forward to cooperation.
Awesome, thank you. Moving on to Mats, with your members and with the interests you represent, I find reading this report and looking at recommendations, I thought, what role does the Arctic Economic Council and business in general have in development of the Arctic? Because there's obviously an idea for economic development, and we need to create jobs, create value in this area. And what are the businesses and what you represent's role in this, and what is your interest in working for the societies here in the NSPAs?
Thank you. And the main interest is this is our home. We don't come up here and then leave and then come up here. And I think a lot of the recommendations in the OECD report, I think we could have asked a lot of people, and we could ask the politician, and they could have given you a lot of those answers very, very quickly, because we live it every day, about transport, about demographics, about youth. So a lot of these. And then the next question is, we often get good recommendations from people, but who is going to pay for it? And that's my main, interest of this report, because it's very good recommendations. I mean, I completely agree with it. And just to say, our priorities of the AEC in the past 2 years has been energy, so that was mentioned. Number 2 has been just transition, that was mentioned. And number 3, thriving communities. And I want to actually delve into the third one, because I think this is the most important, because we talked about youth and we talked about the aging population, which is a global mega trend. I was in China not a long time ago, and they said, we need more people. And that's a country of 1.3 billion people, so it's a global challenge. So what do we do to attract more people here, and what's the role of the private sector? So no one lives here just because of the nature. No one. You need to make a living. You need someone to pay to get food. Yes, you can catch fish, but it's also hard in some times of year where you can. So you need jobs. So you move up here, but no one stays in the same job their whole life. People are changing jobs 2-3 times, so we need more than just one job. We need to go away from the old thinking of there was one fish factory and you will stay there from you were 18 until you were 70 and then you will retire. So we need to create a lot more jobs. That's where the private sector plays a role. Number 2, people don't move to a place and stay in the same house their whole life. People buy one house and then they move to a bigger house and a bigger house. And that's a massive challenge across the region in the northern sparsely populated area, is the housing issues. Like also for young people, how do you enter the labor market? How do we get enough houses so we can extend that? So again, the private sector will play a role here, not only in constructing the houses, but also making sure that we have communities. And then, I think this is an interesting one, is that no one actually moves just for one partner. We know all scientific research shows that women are making the decisions of where family will base themselves. So let's say you move up to the north, but no one also stays with the same partner the whole life. People have 2-3 partners. We have a challenge, though, is the changing population is mainly highly educated women leaving the region, and then we got less educated men staying back, and that creates a change in our system, structural change. And a lot of the companies I speak with says this is the number one challenge, is getting a qualified, competent workforce. And here the EU plays a massive role, of course, with the Schengen Agreement and open borders and Erasmus. That could mention a million things. So the EU plays a massive role here. But it goes back to the main point, we need to make sure we create thriving communities. I mean, no one comes here just for the nature, but also no one comes here just to work. So how do we combine the culture, the youth capital, for example? How do we make it nice to be young here? And how do we use the capital of culture, for example, to make it nice to have culture? But also we need to create the jobs. For that, we heard about that, we need the energy, and we need to make sure that energy prices are fair. And we need to make sure that we continue to develop the infrastructure. What I like about Tromsø is that I have 30 international flights outside the city if I want. I can fly to Madrid, I can fly to London, I can fly to Switzerland. But we are still, for example, not connected with a railroad. So how come that people in the south can take the train wherever they want, but I cannot take a train wherever I want? And that also links back finally to security. So the private sector plays a massive role, especially who's going to pay for all of this. That will probably be a lot of taxpayers' money. Taxpayer money comes from payment from companies. Thank you. You were mentioning some projects that need kind of need for development, industrial stuff, and the development of the region. But
in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of industrial projects, development projects in the region come into conflict with other interests, being maybe environmental, nature, as you were mentioning, indigenous groups. So is it possible to create economic value in the NSPA without sacrificing sustainability, the rights of the various groups living here? And if so, how do we do that? I'm assuming the politicians really want an answer to how we do that easily, clearly.
But we have to. I mean, we don't have an option. We heard the mega trends. I mean, we heard the mega trends. This is global. We'll be 9.7 billion people in 2050, according to the UN on this planet. They need food. That could be seafood from northern Norway. So we need to do it sustainably. If we overfish over the quotas, if we don't treat our oceans right, we will not have food in the future. It's the second largest export from Norway, 95% of export from Greenland. So yes, we need to treat our oceans right, or else we don't have food for the rest of the world. Number two, we know we need a lot more energy. When the war in Ukraine started, it was northern Norway that saved Europe for oil and gas. In the future, it will be Northern Norway saving Europe with renewable energy because we have the best wind areas, but we need to do it in close dialogue with local communities, of course. And I would like to say it's not only indigenous, it's also anyone else in the local communities that wants to make sure that it's done in the right way. And then when it comes to mining, again, we need 7 times more minerals than we have today if we want to achieve our climate targets. Those minerals are not located in Brussels or DC or Paris. Those minerals are located in the sparsely populated area in the north. So how can we get those minerals into market? So a lot of the mega trends that we heard about and the challenges, the solutions are in the north. We also just need to make sure that we then invest not only in that mine, we also need to make sure that we don't only invest in that wind turbines, but that we also build the houses, that we also take care of mental health, and that we also create the infrastructures that makes it nice to work here. And I think that has been the split. Then we often hear from the south, I'm here to help you because I need your raw materials. Okay, you are here to help me because of that. You're not here because you want to support me. And I think that's the kind of the change we need to do, so it becomes a win-win.
Thank you so much for that. Dag, we discussed already, we mentioned 2 different OECD reports about the NSPA. The members of the Arctic Six, together with other universities across the world, produce enormous amounts of research about this area every year. So my question is, what role does this knowledge base, this gathering of knowledge that's done every year, have in the development of the NSPAs in this region for the future? And do you think that when local, regional, and national governments are making decisions about the area, are they taking that knowledge base enough into account with the decision-making, or is it ignored in decision-making processes?
Well, thank you for this question. Well, I will start perhaps by saying something about what the Arctic Six is and what we are trying to do. It is a university alliance of 6 universities in the Arctic parts of Sweden, Norway, and Finland, with Tromsø, of course, and Nord University, who is the new 6th member. We used to be Arctic 5. And Umeå and Luleå universities in Sweden, Oulu and Rovaniemi in Finland. And the whole point of our collaboration, which is in research and in education, but primarily research, is to support sustainable development in the north. And it touches upon several of the topics and challenges that are addressed in the OECD report. And we do that in various ways. We have research collaborations in our Chairs and Fellows program, and where we develop large research programs and projects connecting expertise that we have in all 6 of our universities that relate to major challenges here in the north. And one that was discussed here in the presentation of the OECD report is how to make a green transition just and legitimate in the eyes of northern communities. So that is, we have 2 major Arctic Six chairs research programs under development dealing with this. One is called Rebound, led by Tanja Jona at the University of Lapland, Arctic Center in Rovaniemi, which tries to work out ways of creating value for local communities and addressing challenges coming with energy establishments, with mining, with different types of natural resource extraction related to the green transition that also affects local communities. How can we overcome the goal conflicts that appear in those contexts? Another thing Another big program relates to land use conflicts, where we take a long-term perspective to understand why land use conflicts appear and how people have dealt with them in the past up until the present, in order to develop better models for governing natural resources and steering development today. So these are our areas of research where the Arctic 6 universities come together, joining our expertise in support of knowledge production. But the Arctic 6 does more than that. We also have a program we call the Arctic 6 Extended, where we are developing our collaboration between our universities to also include different groups of key stakeholders up here in the Arctic parts of our countries. So one having to do with different challenges pertaining to the green transition, but also other challenges than those that I just mentioned. For instance, we are now building up a collaboration on the cross-border energy collaboration with energy companies in the north, and experts on energy issues pertaining to both the technological side of energy, but also social challenges such as goal conflicts and so on, in order to build collaborations between companies and the Arctic 6 universities in this field. Another one is, of course, security. That was mentioned here at the end, and perhaps in the summary I have seen, the draft summary I have seen of the OECD report, it's kind of under-communicated, the challenges coming from the new security situation, that relates both to the economy and to the societal situation here in the north. And that is also a field where we are trying to develop. Your second question was, does the decision makers in Stockholm and in Brussels listen to us? Well, I think they do increasingly. We are very happy to see that the Arctic 6 is mentioned in more and more contexts, and we are invited into discussions in an increasing number of occasions. But of course, we want more. We want to have a stronger role, and I think that we deserve to have a stronger role, because when talking about matters that are important for the Arctic region and for our NSPA area up here, which other universities would be better positioned to do this research and to do the educational programs that are needed here? We have been operating in this region for decades already. And we are deeply embedded in the networks of different key stakeholders here. We know the problems here. Like you said, we are not sort of parachuting in and parachuting out, but we are living and experiencing the challenges that are here. And so there's ground for taking into account the value produced at our universities, I would say.
Great, thank you. I want to now open it up to see if there's any questions from the audience that you wanted to address to this panel for moving on. I can't see any, good, because then I can keep asking my question. Damn it. Do you have a microphone or can you just stand up and speak loudly?
Yeah, I'm Keith Larson. I'm the director of the Arctic Center from University and also one of the collaborators with DOG at the Arctic 6. And when we start thinking about our communities, and we start thinking about what our universities, what we bring to it. We don't just, we just don't do research there, we live there. And I think that's a really key thing, is that we can provide insights, both as the people that do research there, our partners work for the companies in the region, etc. But I think, I just wanted to make that comment, but then I have a question. When we start thinking about the green transition and energy development, what we've seen in the last couple of days, with this whole thing that's just happened with AI, 1 trillion in assets being wiped off the map because of a major innovation. We need to be smarter. We need to think. For example, we are de-risking it for the corporations to come up here, for the mining, for the energy development, for all of those things. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But we also need to de-risk it for our communities. Because when somebody comes up here and then they build a big factory, like we have in Skellefteå, for example, and then all of a sudden there are market constraints or say a new innovation, it completely changed the things. If the OECD is thinking 10, 15 years down the road, how do you take into account for those kind of stochastic or random type things that we don't anticipate? So I'm wondering if you guys can address that, because I think the AI thing clearly lays out a clear and present danger to focusing on, say, we need 7 times as much minerals, or we need this amount of energy over the next 10 to 15 years.
So, Mats, first, you want to address that?
I want to link it with this whole panel, actually. It's a very good point. When the Commission's president came out, when he appointed all the commissioners, he has what is called a mission letter. So a mission letter is he writes, here are the tasks for this commissioner. And in the mission letters, it mentioned you have to go and visit the sparsely populated areas. Like that's number 2 point to all the commissioners. Come and visit the region. Be there more often. Come and talk with the local communities. And I would like on the stage to actually invite whatever commissioner, not only DG Mare, to come to Kirkenes. Because Kirkenes is a good example of what you're mentioning there. So Kirkenes is a very small border community that for the past 20 years we're told, trade with Russia, trade with Russia, trade with Russia, have a mine, get some tourism. We get a pandemic, tourism dies out in the north there. This is a small community of 3,500 people, so tourism disappeared. Suddenly mining investments start going away, so the mine closed. We didn't see that coming. There was more mining in China suddenly. Then China comes in and says, we're willing to invest in the port, and the government says, no, we don't want Chinese investments because of geopolitics. Then we come to the last part, which is there was a small company called Barrel. Barrel makes, when you go on an airplane, they make the emergency strips, the fluorescent lights you see on the Airbus planes. They are produced in the most northern part of Norway, and they are sent to Toulouse, and then they're installed on planes that flies around the world. Their whole business model was dependent on working together in a tax-free zone with Russia. So if they produce some of their work in Russia, send it into Kirkenes, and then it will be sent to Toulouse. The war in Ukraine happens, their whole business model ruins. Same with the shipyard, etc. You have a community here that has just been kicked and kicked and kicked again and again, and there has been very little understanding, I think, for example, from not only from Brussels, but from globally around the world, the impact for local communities, for pandemics, for all of this. Because, when the pandemic happened and I was in Copenhagen, I didn't feel the big impact, but you feel the big impact in local communities. When the war happened, EU sanctions has a massive impact in remote, sparsely populated. So how do you create resilient societies? How do you de-risk this? And this is about diversifying the economy. This is about providing more than just tourism, more than just mining, and more than just energy transition. So, and then we can only do it with science. We need the scientists to help predict where is the future going to take us, where are the next black swans, so to say. So we need to collaborate. That's basically it.
Thank you, Claude. Did you also want to speak to that?
Yes, not least to thank Mats for recalling the mission letter of our commissioners. Yes, it is true. The President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, issued a mission letter, what we call a mission letter, for each of the commissioners at the start of their mandate. All of them have youth, and there is also visit the NSPA. Not the NSPA, go to the region to see what it is. So we're here, it means NSPA, go to the region. Absolutely, and thanks for reminding me. I've heard from the researcher community, and I've met with the Tromsø University on Sunday, some words that resonate with what you've said. I hear myself innovation. I hear agility. Okay? How do you keep ahead of the curve? And how can we do that jointly? We have many responsibility as a legislator. What is the EU? The EU is a payer. The EU is a legislator, definitely. I hope we can be a player as well, but we definitely in the Arctic through our legislation. And it's not just EU member states. I mean, Norway, Iceland are part of the EEA, which means our legislation applies. So this is the famous Brussels effect. How do we de-risk with our legislation? So we do critical raw material with memorandum of understanding because the asset is there, but at the same time we should not jeopardize the environment because, as you say, it's not will you take care of environment, climate, etc.? It's not will you, it's not an if, it's how will you do that? And this is what we're looking at.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we had time for with you guys. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Wish we had more time. There's a lot more I wanted to discuss. But yeah, give them all a warm round of applause. And if you have any more questions, then you can contact them throughout the day. Now, for our second panel today, we'll speak to some representatives of different levels of governance in the region. First, joining us today, we have Jonas Andersson, Regional Councillor and Chair of the Regional Development Committee for Region Jämtland Härjedalen and Chair of the Northern Sparsely Populated Areas Steering Committee. We have also joining us Karina Sameli, Mayor of Luleå. We have Benjamin Furuli, the Deputy County Mayor of Troms. We have Ivar B. Pressbakmo, State Secretary, Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development in Norway. And we have Päivi Ekdahl, Development Director at Regional Council of Lapland. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I want to start off, thank you, with you, Jonas. As chair of the NSPA Steering Committee, I assume you have been awaiting this report with bated breath. And what is your hope for the outcomes and the implementations of the recommendations in this report?
Well, yeah, it was on. Well, thank you very much for getting the word, and thank you for inviting me to come here to magnificent Tromsø. It's my first time this far north, actually. I've never been this far north in the world, so it's maybe symptomatical for me being the chair of NSPA when I've never been here, but I'll return. Well, I would say that my hopes and my wishes for this report is that it can be a continuation of the good work that the old territorial review has provided the local communities and regional communities with the policies or the ideas for policies to really make a difference, both when it comes to our own governance, but mainly perhaps for the promotion of our situation, our needs and our possibilities in our regions towards our national and European level, because we really need to continue to proliferate that we are both an area of the European Union who want to provide, who want to be a part of making our continent more successful and more productive, but we also need certain place-based strategies to be able to implement and to be able to provide and to be able to grow stronger in our region. So those are my hopes. And lastly, I would like to just invite all of you to the 18th of February when the relaunch of this study will be in Brussels. More details are available through the NSPA. That will be the relaunch where we will have a longer discussion with more detail about the report.
Thank you so much. I want to move on to you, Karina. We heard a lot about, from the broader perspective, the value of cooperation and the value of thinking across borders and regionally. But as a municipality, is there any value to thinking regionally, cooperating across borders? Or is this kind of just a high-flying idea thing and not for those working on the ground, providing services for the people living here?
Well, of course, you need cooperation because no one is wise enough to know everything. And usually someone else has done something right. And usually someone else is facing the same problems as you do. And that is basically the idea of the NSPA. I mean, we know that we up in the north have other challenges than other people have in other countries or in other parts of our countries. I see it when I talk to my colleague mayors in southern Sweden. They look at things in another way, because I always have to think about that we are not as big population. We are older. We have big distances. Even if we have good companies and good growth, we do not grow as fast as cities in our size because we are too slow, too distant, too remote, too little critical mass for growth, actually. And then we need some help in doing that. And then you need to work together with others. Because what I see when I cooperate with Tromsø or with Oulu or other cities my size, but also the smaller communities within the northern parts, I see that we have the same challenges and we need to start solving them together. But what I also want to say is that it's very, very important that we solve them locally. Sometimes people think there's like a magic wound somewhere, and then you're like, well, now we solve it in this way. And then it's supposed to work everywhere. And what I think that we actually, or I read out of the report, is actually that there is no magic wound saying that you should do the same thing. It says that you need to cooperate with the ones who do the regional or local development and find their keys to their development. That's the smart way of using it. And that's quite the opposite of having one program or one structure or one plan for the North. Because we have the same challenges, but we have to solve them in different ways in every society. And then we have to learn from each other. And that's why you need cooperation.
I want to take what you were saying, Karina, and take it over to Benjamin, because this idea of that kind of cooperation, the work on the municipal level, I feel like a county and the regional level kind of has a role as facilitating that work. And how do you work with that kind of cross-municipal cooperation, both internally in Troms, but also across the region? And how does a report like this support your work with that? And how do you implement the recommendations from a report like this in your work?
Well, I agree with Karina that it's very important to cooperate. And actually, this is the third time me and Karina meets in a panel like this for the first, I think, 3-4 months. First in Oulu, then in Luleå, and now in Tromsø. And it's very important that we keep discussing the common challenges and the opportunities and how to develop our region, because we are not that different that we think sometimes. So. And the report we will use, of course, to keep on influencing the national and international policies on how to develop our region. The description of our region we are very familiar to us. We are, of course, as a region, well known of what are the challenges in our region. We work closely with our municipalities on those matters, both the demographic decline, infrastructure needs, and of course the need for more businesses and industry. So I think that the report is valuable because it actually underlines the arguments that we already are trying to reach out to our national level to take action and to implement some of the recommendations. And of course, the report also gives us a broader perspective, not only highlighting the challenges. As politicians, we often discuss the challenges because we want to make the societies we live in better. But I think it's very nice that Jose highlighted that also very much things are going good in our region, in the NSPA. We are performing well on innovation, reducing climate emissions. GDP production is going the right way, and I think that is important to remember as well. I would also especially like to emphasize the importance of infrastructure investment going forward, especially east-west. Now we know the security picture has changed, and it's more important that we make sure that our national governments work together on how to make a plan to ensure that the infrastructure is accordingly to the new situation. And of course, keep on working closely both locally, regionally, and nationally on these matters.
Thank you. Päivi, I want to take it over to you. The Regional Council of Lapland's stated goal is to create success in a sustainable way in the region of Lapland. So I was wondering, with what was presented here earlier today from the report, what part of the findings and recommendations do you find most interesting relating to that goal, and what do you see are the most important steps to achieving that sustainable success for your members?
Yeah, thank you. I was especially seeing the report, the draft report, from that perspective, and I actually noticed there are quite a few very positive issues concerning Lapland, and some examples. For example, GDP in Lapland in 2020 was higher than Finnish regional average, and also higher than the OECD average, and very marginally lower than the NSPA regional average. So in that way, of course, we are doing very well at the moment. Also, the exports from Lapland were higher in 2020 than the average regional export values in Finland, and substantially greater than in the NSPA regional average. Of course, you all know about the tourism in Lapland, and especially, of course, Rovaniemi, but the whole Lapland. the number of overnight stays in Lapland concerning foreign tourists was close to 5.5 times higher than the average of regions in Finland, and also 3.3 times higher than in the NSPA. So those issues, I think, are very. We kind of have the assets to creating the success in Lapland, but of course also we have the issues that are not so well, and one of those to mention is that we are very low in Lapland, for example, in patenting intensity compared to Finnish regional average and to NSPA average. So in that we of course need to do better. And what we how to make it sustainable, we need to strengthen the research and development and investments and innovations. We need to diversify our economy. We need to attract international talents, and I think very important for the sustainability point of view is that we need to get the local acceptance, because even though we are doing very well in sustainability, on environmental sustainability is on high level, so we need to pay attention also to other sides of sustainability. And also what comes to the whole of NSPA and the sustainability and growth, it is mentioned in the draft report that the regions are well positioned for green transition, and we have significant progress in emission reductions. Also, we are leaders in the renewable energy, and I don't know, maybe you know it, but for me it was new information that the number is so high that in our NSPA region, 99% of the electricity production is from renewable solutions. So I think that we have a good basis for getting sustainable growth in the region.
Thank you. Ivar, you're here representing the national government, and it's obvious for the regional levels and the municipal levels, the interest in our region, the place we live. But I want to address that some of these, or a lot of the recommendations, imply involvement on the national level and national policy directed on developing this area. And what is the value for the governments in Oslo, Stockholm, Helsinki in developing this area? Is it just with the kindness of your hearts, or is there actual value for the national governments in developing the NSPAs?
Well, I have the advantage that I was a member of the regional council in Troms when the last report was made, and was participating in some of the interviews, as a matter of fact. So my personal standing is quite obvious, but also in the national context, it's important to remember that the High North is the most important strategic focus area from national politics, and that's, of course, it's several reasons for that. One of them is regarding to the security situation, the global situation. But before we had this war from Russia, it was also a geopolitical situation that told us, everybody, that the North is where it's going to happen. And it was said in the last panel, the solution is in the North. And that's true, but one of the most important issues then is to secure that you don't get a gap between the local communities, the local population, and the national or regional policies. Because energy is one of those issues, sustainability is one other of those issues, but of course the development of the local society is the most important issues for most of the people living in the North. How do you see how do you feel that your future are? Is there any future here? Everybody knows that there is a future here, but we have to establish some mechanisms that makes it possible to solve the challenges and use the possibilities. And from the government sides, we have established regional development agreements with, for instance, Nordland County, with a group of municipalities. Two groups of municipalities in Finnmark and one in northern Troms. And we also have a special targeting the eastern Finnmark issues. So, of course, it's quite high on the political level. And the last thing I would like to mention at this time is that in the 18th of February, it's a relaunch in Brussels. My plan is to go there. I don't know really what's happening in the government, so it's not sure, but my plan is to go there. But more important is that I think it's, I would like to congratulate the OECD with the work and the Commission with the background on that, but also to invite to present the report for the national government, my boss, the minister, and also do that in both Stockholm and Helsinki, because it's quite important to make these kind of information and knowledge keep up with the policy, because the policy is changing every day, not the direction, but the premises. It's 1 week since we got a new president in the United States. That's changed a lot of discussions, to be modest. But of course, we have to think. I became a grandfather on Christmas Eve last year. And that told me one thing. And she's going to be over 70 years in the year 2100. My grandfather was born in the year 1900. That means that I have some stockholders in a 200 years period. And in this part of the world, in the northern part of Norway, Finland and Sweden, we have many hundred years of experienced collaboration. And that's perhaps one of the most important things we can do and plan for, is to increase the cooperation on the cross-border cooperation east-west in these 3 countries. Thank you.
Yeah, Karina, you had a comment on that, and then Jonas afterwards.
Yeah, 2 years ago, Sweden had the presidency of the European Union, and our first meeting, or the Swedish government's first meeting, when invited Ursula von der Leyen and everyone, they went to Kiruna. And then in the end of the presidency, they had a second meeting, a TTC meeting with the US government, and then they put it in Luleå. So both the big meetings with both the European leaders went to northern Sweden. And why? Well, because the north is important. We have the high security situation, of course. We have minerals, we have energy, we have parts that the world needs up in our regions. And what I'm afraid of is that the governments understand the importance of the north, but they don't understand that many of us who sit here, we need to handle local conflicts. We need to handle diversity. We need to handle that not everything is good and working out. And when we go to like new minerals or things like that, you will need more land, and people will be affected. Some of them are Sami people, and some of them are not. They're just living there, and they actually like the way they are living right now, and maybe are not that into changing that, actually. And that's what I really, really would like from the national level, like work together with us. Northern Sweden also have a history of, like, we were the colony of the north, where you took the minerals and energy and left, and then the value and the growth and the development was in the south. So right now, when we have like a new wave of investments in parts of the north, we're like, well, wait a second, is this really good for us, or aren't you important? And then at the same time, we have the governments really like, oh, you're important, you're important. So that's one of the challenges, and also to see that we are cities, urban societies, and rural societies with different challenges. And how do we handle that? And what I often get the question, what do I want? And I was like, I want someone to sit next to me and think together with me, and then be able to say, like, oh, you know that this university knows this? Do you know that we have fundings for this that you can use for developing this? And that's something you usually do not find as much, but it's very, very important that we have that, like the possibility to think together with others to be able to solve the problems locally and regionally.
Jonas.
Well, firstly, I really do not need to say anything, because Karina and I are basically having the same thoughts. But if I kind of develop it for a while, I think that you're really into something, and that's that we really need the strong local authorities, and we need the understanding from our national governments and from the European level that to be able to do this in a sustainable, in a respectful, and in a secure way, we need to have local acceptance. And the only way to get local acceptance for whether or not it's developments regarding defense, if it's green energy, if it's critical minerals, if it's forestry, any of these areas where we do have our strengths in the NSPA, we really need local acceptance, and that can only be provided through a strong local presence. There is no way to be able to defend the High North. There is no way to be able to in a sustainable way, use our natural resources without presence, without people living here, people who want to live here. The worst thing that can happen and do happen to many societies is the fly-in, fly-out situation, because there is a lack of workforce, there is a lack of people, and therefore we need strong policy that makes it attractive, that makes it feasible, and makes it that people wish to move and live in the north. And I think the only way to do that is to continue to have that strength and to strengthen the local and regional authorities. And frankly, I'm a bit scared or worried right now when you hear what's happening inside of the European Union, where there is talk about nationalizing, making national programs when it comes to the structural funds, when it comes to the cohesion policy. There is a movement towards making more and more of the implementation of those policies on the national level. And I'm not an enemy of the national government, but I believe that to be able to do this in a sustainable and a long-term feasible way, there needs to be a local involvement. And right now, the movement is towards the other side of the spectrum, and that scares me and worries me a bit, because then we will have all of these conflicts of interest. We will have an even worse situation for mayors like Karina or local commissioners like myself when we meet our local populace and need to explain why the system is moving in another direction. So if there's one message I would say that I take with me from the OECD study, is the need for strengthening local authorities and their toolbox to be able to adapt and tailor-make the policies for the different regions and municipalities.
And one of the recommendations in this is moving tasks over to the regional municipal level, and with the fiscal capacity to complete them as well. Päivi, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, and there was this discussion also about how and who will, how this report will be used and who is responsible for using it. And also referring to your previous comments on the national level and how the national level is taking into notice this report or this recommendation. So on those issues, I think that even though it was also mentioned that we who are living here in the region, we know most of the issues that were stated in the report, but of course there is like the statistical facts and findings to support them. But one benefit of that report also for me is that OECD has anyway a reputation, a very good reputation as a very trustworthy organization who produces very qualified reports. So when our national ministries read those reports that have the OECD stamp, they believe them better than if we would have been writing those issues and raising them up. So I think that's a big benefit when thinking about the national level. And then to that the cooperation between the regions, I've been quite a long time already involved in this NSPA network, and I think that's a very valuable network. And what makes it valuable is that we know each other, and we even though we don't on day-to-day basis work together, if I have an issue, I know who to contact. And I know also via the previous report, and I think that also this new report, it is giving up us assets to know what is happening in the neighboring regions. I just need to open the report and see what are the advantages and disadvantages and challenges in the region that I'm interested in, or what we have been thinking about as a potential partner in a project. So I think that's also a very big strength of that report, and all the information it produces us in order to be able to do those joint projects that were also recommended that we should do them together more than we are doing them now at the moment. So to build the knowledge base. It is like smart specialization strategies, so it gives also the same kind of information on regions and gives us hints on with whom to cooperate, with which issues.
Benjamin, you want to comment first and then Ivar afterwards?
Yeah, going back to what Karina said about local perspective, and I do believe that the local communities has to have a decisive say in the more of the cases that on how to develop our communities. But I think that the energy question is an interesting example that also shows that it's difficult for all of the local communities and our municipalities. At least in our region, it's the municipalities that have the responsible for area planning and are in the middle of conflict interests of the wind power, for example. We know that Norway needs to increase the production of renewable energy, but it's really important because you have a conflict of interest between the Sami people, the nature, and then the need for more energy in our region. So I think that the regions that we represent, that I represent, the counties, could have a bigger role there in ensuring that we have a more regional perspective on the need of more energy, and so it's important to also include that. And I also agree with Jonas when he says that the local communities has, but I think that we need more national engagement as well. We need more national interest and strategies for how to develop our region, and not least we need funding to do so, because we are a region that lacks that. Yeah.
Do you feel that the national government is engaged in the region as of today?
I think we need even more, because we have very good understanding and common understanding of the challenges and the opportunities in the north, but I think we need more action and we need more things to actually happen, both for infrastructure, energy, business development, and how to ensure that people can actually live and thrive in our region.
Ivar, you want to speak to the tasks and responsibilities and dividing them up?
Yeah, it reminds me that from the year 1999 to 2014, I was a mayor in a local municipality here in Troms, and of course, in one way, it's a fantastic situation to know as a local politician or an inhabitants in a northern, especially populated area, that the whole world is looking at you. But it's also quite terrifying, because what do they want? And of course, when we discuss energy or we discuss the green transmission, there are a lot of dilemmas. And be sure that dilemma is also a national issue. Of course it is, because it's not easy to say that you are going to increase renewable energy at the same time taking care of the indigenous interests, the local interests, the how to implement jobs in this, how to create the growth, and where does the growth come. Of course, that's a huge amount of dilemmas. But be sure one thing, my ministry has, of course, with our responsibility, we are quite aware of those issues, and we are taking it quite seriously. And that's why, for instance, the process we have also regarding to Troms County, regarding to cooperate with smaller municipalities to get agreements and processes that makes them closer to the decisions and be a part of the national decision processes is quite important, and that we are doing something on. But of course, it also was a question of money, of cash and work. And that's one discussion that was for a couple of years ago and still is going, is when the government established a resource rent on fishery industry and on onshore windmill. That was a quite big discussion. But one of the positive things is that it puts money to the local municipalities and to the county. And that discussion in how the values are distributed is one important thing when we're discussing the development in the future. It isn't the easy way, of course not, because we shouldn't think that if I just give you the money, everything's okay. That's not okay. But it's a part of the possibility of thinking, okay, is this some possibilities for us locally when the global society needs this and needs that? Then we have to discuss those kind of things. It's difficult, but it's an important thing. But I also need to say that it's important that local and regional governance have a focus on establishing understanding in different national authorities of seeing things coordinated, because energy policy is one thing, green sustainability is one thing, policy against regional development is one thing. You have to see them in comparedness, and that's not always the issue nationally, unfortunately, and that's a global issue, I would think. So, but my ministry, of course, does everything. Of course.
I'll give Jonas the last quick talk before we move on.
Yeah. I just wanted to reiterate or make everyone sure that I do not mean that there's a dichotomy between more national involvement in our area and a stronger local authority or a stronger regional authority. I think it's exactly in the opposite. To be able to do this in a good way, we need to have the support of the national government. We need to have the understanding from the local government. But the only way to be able to do place-based initiatives that really pinpoints the needs of every part of the NSBA, I think that there is also a need for a good dialogue and a discussion within where we actually address the issues that are locally and regionally important. Because even though the NSBA has a lot in common, we also have differences, and that's one of the things that the OECD report actually really pinpoints, that there is a big difference between Troms and Lapland, and there is difference between Norrbotten and Jämtland Härjedalen, and there's difference between all of us, and that means that you can't have a one-size-fits-all policy, a national or a European policy. It needs to be place-based, and it needs to be locally tailored to be able to get the most payback from the initiatives that are put into work. So, of course, we need infrastructure. Of course, we need investment money for our businesses. Of course, we need an academia that is sustainable, or it is already, but that gets even more money to do studies and research. But we need to do it in place-based initiatives. I think that's my main holdout.
I'll open it up to the floor now. Are there any questions? Yes, we have one over here. We need a microphone. Is there any in the room, or do we have to use one from here? Yeah, we can use this one.
Thank you. John Kostet, Rio Norrbotten. With this OECD report in mind, what would be your main message to the decision makers in Brussels, having in mind also that the Commission will propose a long-term budget in 6 months? Unfortunately, I think our EU Arctic ambassador left the building, which is a bit unfortunate given my question, but please.
Anyone want to speak to that?
My short answer is the need for a stronger, not a weaker cohesion policy coming into the next MFF.
My short answer will be infrastructure investments.
My short answer is to continue to recognize that we have differences up in the north, that they do not suit the same system as everyone else. So we still will need a special solution for us to be able to have growth.
The most important thing is that this part of the world you find nowhere else. And that should also be accomplished through the processes and priorities. This is the northern specific area, and you can compare with many other areas, but we have our quite different issues that are important on the schedule. So it shouldn't be the same in other parts. You should maintain the focus on what's specific here.
For the future cohesion policy, I would say that to keep the multi-level governance and not to concentrate the funds and the use of funds to the national level, but keep it in the regions, because regions know what is needed in the regions.
Thank you also for your brief answers and kind of organically creating the quick-fire answer technique. Yes, we have a question here. Kirsti.
Thank you. So I'm Kirsti Mette from the North Norwegian European Office. One of the recommendations is that we should increase cross-border cooperation in this area. And I was just wondering, what does the panel think exactly concretely that should be done in order, for instance, for municipalities or regional authorities to cooperate closer?
Anyone want to speak to that?
Maybe I can start and we then
do the other way around.
I think that one of the main issues in enabling, for example, municipalities to work together and make cooperation projects is that we provide meeting places, we provide possibilities for them to discuss to meet and discuss for people from different levels, from the municipalities, from the regions, politicians, officials, experts, because those discussions are the places where the ideas are born.
In general, I would say that when the picture is like it's now, when Sweden and Finland also are NATO members, that opens the door for a lot of things. But I think if you don't, in a regional or municipality level, establish good cooperation systems, then the national authorities will take that space. And that's not the best way of doing it. So I would say regional and municipality authorities should enhance increased cooperation east-west. And that would be the best way. And you know what's most important. And then you have to create the areas or the place to talk about it and to establish common knowledge, establish common views, and to communicate them. That's the most important thing, I would say.
I would say that you need the platforms. We are in the Arctic Mayors Forum, and when we sometimes lack finance for that, we're like, well, then we quit doing it. And we're like, well, someone will reinvent it in a year then, because we will still need cities cooperating, even if we don't do it. So we need the platforms. The Arctic 6 is one platform. The AMF is another platform. The NSPA is an existing working platform. But you need the platform. Otherwise, you can't get to know anyone. And before this, I went to the Interreg seminar, and we also need funding where we can cooperate cross-border and transnational. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult for me to go home to my municipality and say that, well, I want to spend some money on traveling. They are like, why would you do that? What's in it for us? So we need to be able to say why we're doing it, of course, but still we need some help with the funding so it is easier for us to start the cooperation.
Well, I agree with everything that's said. I think the meeting points is a crucial point here. Even though the Barents Regional Council now is history and not the same as it has been, I think that one of the key factors and the key successes of that was that the regional and local level met the national level and discussing what was important to implement of new policies. So I think that is a key that we need to make sure that we don't lose now that we lose the Barents Regional Council.
Well, there has been so much wise things said, but I think that the main reason for why we need to have arenas like this and like all of the other organizations are exactly what Carina and Päivi and Benjamin was. We need to be there, because if we're not there, someone else will be there, and they will make their interpretation of what our populace wants, what our companies want, what our regional authorities want, and this is quite often quite hard to explain to of course, our inhabitants, but also sometimes to our political colleagues and opponents, that if we're not there, someone else will be there, and it will be their agenda and their views that are put forth. So I think that we need to have, I might sound a bit idealistic in this, but we need to actually change the frame of mind, because meetings where people, where stakeholders, where decision makers meet, cooperate, and put a common agenda on the table is the only way to change the world, and we need to do that, and there's no other way to do it. Lastly, I would say, and to return to infrastructure, there is also a bit of a problem in the NSPA, because every time we go to one of our regions, most of us will need to have at least 1 or sometimes 1.5 of travel day. And then we come back to the east-western infrastructure needs, because when I went here, I started my travel at 3 p.m. yesterday, and I landed here in Tromsø at 1 this morning, because that was the only and closest and fastest way to get there. So that's a barrier, and we need to have infrastructure to be able to further our meetings with each other.
So it's finally, we're landing now, but just finally, really quick, does anyone have an answer to the headline question, the title question? Whose responsibility is it to implement these recommendations, and who's going to pick up this report and start to work and invite the rest of you guys to work together to implement it?
All of us. Because that's the whole part of it, or the whole point of the study. There are local, there are regional, there are national, and there are European goals, recommendations, and targets. And there is not one part who can do this. We need to do it together, and we will need to do it from each of our responsibilities and perspectives.
Awesome, thank you so much. So, just want to end it by saying that the organizers of this event, the County of Troms, the County of Nordland, and the Northern European offices in Brussels of Finland, Sweden, and Norway, who organized this event, just want to say thank you to everyone here who came here and joined us for this session. Thank you to the panelists and the panelists from the last panel for your contributions. It's been a very interesting discussion, and I assume you're going to hear a lot of questions about this from the people who were here, and I at least have a lot more questions I want to get answered on a personal level, not on the stage later. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming.